Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Facebook Live. I'm so happy to see you here, and I just want to give a quick little experience that I had about storytelling in the last, I would say, 2 weeks. I actually had a house full of storytellers here in New Hampshire for over a week. It was fascinating because I'd actually been thinking about storytelling in terms of my story, how I want my daily story to go, how I want my weekly story to go, how I want my life story to go. And here I was presented with a house full of storytellers, no joke. It was fascinating to watch how much these storytellers loved relating experiences. And in addition to relating the experience, being able to be so descriptive about something that they were taught storytelling about. So I had a house full of these people, there were men and women, and I was just constantly being engaged with all of these stories from China, stories from England, stories from Native American history, stories from England, stories from all over. So I had this experience, so I'm kind of rolling in this storytelling existence. And yesterday I had to tell two stories. Two stories. And it really highlighted how important the ability to tell a story is. I had to tell my story yesterday morning. I actually have engaged a business coach to work with me with the things that I'm sharing with all of you. And I had to sit with this complete stranger, and we only had an hour, and I had to outline my story of what it was that I was working on, the different projects that I'm working on, the different live workshops that I'm working on. So I had to be able to sit there and tell her the story of what these things were. She had looked at my website, sure. She had looked at me on Facebook, sure. But I had to tell her the story of these things. Complete stranger. Complete stranger, which these things to me make perfect sense. I know they make perfect sense to you because you've been hearing me talk about them here on Facebook, but this is someone who was just hearing my story cold. The interesting thing that happened was I had to really cut down my language and stay focused. And the way I did that when I was sitting across from her on the desk was I had my notebook and I wrote down the 3 workshops that I'm marketing this year, and then the app that I'm going to be marketing for the second part of the year that I'm doing with Sean Kramer, the meditation app. So I had to describe these things to her and give her the story about all of these 4 things in a way that she could get it so we could map out and plan how things are going. Hey everybody, I love the hearts. Thank you. Good to see you. So that was the first story I had to tell. And the second story came, so I kind of came home from that and I was exhausted. I had total brain fry type of thing, and I actually had to just sit here and chill, take a nap, eat some lunch, and then get ready for the second part of storytelling that I had to do yesterday, which meant that I was going in front of a group of parents, about 30 parents at a school, outlining and telling the story of what I was going to be working with their children with this upcoming year. And the theme with this particular school is the jungle. So I had to explain to them the arts integration process of what we were going to be doing in the classroom and the songs we were going to be singing and blah, 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 basically the year's lesson plan. So that was the story that I had to tell. But then there was another story that kind of came at me at the end of that. So I presented this program to the parents, and then the school's director said, well, why don't you tell them about your background and where you come from? So here I went. Third story. I had to reach back on the spot and say the story of how I got to the point of standing in front of them and being able to present this stuff. That was hard. That was really hard because I had to reach back and say, okay, taking singing lessons since I was tiny, always performing, loving studying music and performing music. And then I had bands, then I was in shows, and then I went to undergrad, Berklee College of Music, and then I had lots more bands, grad school, Lesley University, yoga training, yada, yada. So I had to tell these stories about what I was doing and what I was planning on doing and how I got to the point where I was doing both. I was so thankful I had storytellers in my house. because I think I did a really, really good job in honing the language, highlighting the points, not getting distracted, and understanding the message of what I had to get across in each one of these instances. And here's the thing. In each one of these storytelling moments, I was really telling my story. I was telling my story. Even if I was describing the workshops, even if I was describing the app, even if I was describing the lesson plan, even if I was describing education that I had in the past, my certification, if you will, I was telling my story. And it drew me back to this whole experience I've been having with Snapchat, and now on Instagram there's something called Instagram stories. And what's interesting in society now, in kind of social media society, we are being asked to tell our story. So when I'm on Snapchat, for example, I actually think about what part of my day am I going to present to the millennials that are following me on there? What would be an interesting part of my daily story that I can present to them? So that's one storyline that I'm planning, or not planning, but being aware of, looking for. And then when you go into Instagram stories, which I have not engaged in yet, I see a lot of different things happening where people will just not have a concept of presenting a story, presenting their story. A story is not you holding your camera at your dog who's just got a haircut and gone to the shampoo place. That's not an engaging story. An engaging story is you taking folks through a portion of your day that you think will serve them in some way, that you think will interest them in some way, that you think will change them in some way. How can your story influence and change others? You have to be aware of what your story is. What story are you presenting? So yesterday, when I was engaged in all of these storytelling angles, it was my story. But how can I present aspects of my story to them, her, you, whoever it is I see, that can not only present a possibility of a path for somebody, but can also encourage others to find ways to tell their story. So when you are working in social media, when you are presenting in front of people, whether it's at a meeting, always think about what is the story you are telling. It is intrinsically you telling the story. You have to be sure in your story and who you are and how you got there. And then what is the journey you're taking them on? What is the mind journey that you're taking them on? What is the mind map? What is the path you're taking them on? So when you add that element of storytelling, of relating experience, of relating nuance, of relating description, it's so much more captivating. Like I said, then as cute as your dog is, and I have cute dogs, it's so much more interesting than here's my dog. And there's someone I'm following on Snapchat, I won't say who this person is, but they're so good about the story of their days, and I just can't wait to see what he is doing next. I think it's just so great because he lays out a really great storyline. It's very natural, it's very organic, but he's very aware of putting something on social media that will engage me and want to watch what he has going on, because it's inspiring, it's fun, and it gets me pumped to be like, I want to go do that. So when you're presenting all of these things in front of your business, in front of your colleagues, if you are an actual storyteller or an actual performer, thinking about what is, first and foremost, your story. How did you get to this point that you are able to stand up or be in front of a camera in front of people and relate your experience, your story? And then secondly, have an arc of a story that you're going to present. Have an arc of a story filled with images that you can describe and that your audience can actually engage with and imagine. I loved reading when I taught college, when I taught undergrad, I loved reading the papers that students would hand in, and they'd have to describe a live concert that they went to. And there were the papers that came in, the students that said, I walked into House of Blues, it was packed, the music rocked, and I had a great night, and the band sounded really good, and they did this song, that song, this song, that song, this song, that song, and then they just would have this one little setup, and then they would list all the songs that they did, and then it was a great night, I was exhausted, and I went home. Well, that's about as exciting of a story as paper. What I loved were the students that were able to set the scene. I got in my cool new van that I've bought that's decked out with all kinds of interior painting, and I got in the car. I was dressed in my best cool all black outfit that showed off my tats, you know, and we drove down Route 3. It was a foggy, rainy day, you can imagine, but we didn't care because we were going to hear whoever it is, the Metzingers or whatever, whoever you're going to see. We pull up into Cambridge, one of the blah, you know, so when they really describe the environment and set up the story, that I'm sitting there going, yeah, I want to read more about your paper. I want to know more about your story. I love it. It's great. So that's just one example of how we have to be aware of our own personal story. We have to be aware of aspects of our story that can benefit others. Those students that were writing their papers, they didn't know it, but they were either entertaining me or they weren't. They were either interesting or they weren't. So how can you find your story? How can you direct your story? So when you sit down on Sunday and plan your week, you are essentially planning your story. You're planning and taking control as much as possible of what your experience is going to be for the next 7 days. Not to say that it's going to change, and actually I hope it changes. I hope your little plan thing gets derailed. But when you're mapping out your week in terms of your work, it's mapping out your story and taking control of, what do I want my story to be? What do I want my experience to be in this next week? So I hope that for you. I'm really trying to do that myself. So when I sit down every Sunday and map out this thing, which I think I've shown you all before, just the weekly thing that I do, looking at it not so much in the sense of the things I have to do. Looking at it from a creative standpoint. Sure, I have to do these things, but how do I want to create the storyline of my week? And I found that when I do that, when I look at it, this planning thing that way, I actually make a bigger effort to put fun in there. I make a bigger effort to put things that are beneficial to me in there. If I just break out your generic weekly calendar, weekly planner thing, I usually don't do that. So reframe how you're planning out your time. Reframe your time in terms of, what is my story going to be this week? And then the last point, I'll let you all go, and I want to tell you about something real quick. If you reframe your to-do list, we'll just start with that, as what is my story going to be this week, it changes the way you look at it. It becomes a real fun thing. It becomes a real happy thing, not, I gotta go through my whole list. That's pretty good. It becomes a really happy, joyful thing. Like, I can't wait till I can lay down on my yoga mat and listen to my podcast for 10 minutes or whatever, 15 minutes. I can't wait until I get to go to the beach with Sebastian. I can't wait till I get to go to the party with Cassie. You know, so it becomes, the aspect of putting those fun things in there changes your story from to, this is great. I can't wait to tell my Facebook friends that I actually went to the beach. Okay, I gotta go. But I want to tell you, tomorrow morning I'm going to do a yoga session here in the music room, right over there, 9 o'clock. So if you want to join me live, just have your yoga mat rolled out and ready to go at 9 o'clock. It will be a 15 to 18 minute sequence like the one I did 2 weeks ago. I'm going to try and do it twice a month in here. You want to have a blanket, just some little padding for your knees. And if you have a yoga block, just have the yoga block ready with you tomorrow morning, Wednesday at 9 o'clock, if you want to do a live yoga with me. The camera's too far, so I can't see your comments, but just show up and we'll have a great time and do some basic yoga, okay? So I hope to see you. Have a great week. Be aware of your story. Share your story, have fun with your story, and tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock, we'll do some stretching. Bye, everybody. Toodaloo.